We want to hear the latest on the ground in Iran. Professor Seyed Marandi from the University of Tehran in Iran joins us on Skype. Professor Marandi, good evening and thank you so much for joining us on The Globe.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Now, Prof, scenes that have taken place that the whole world is watching is the people of Iran pouring out onto the streets in Tehran to bid their last farewell to a leader that they clearly loved and revered.
Yes, according to estimates, there were over 5 million people in Tehran alone. And the bodies were taken to 3 cities. And in the 2 other cities, there were hundreds of thousands of mourners. And in Tehran, over 5 million, which is extraordinary. It's quite obvious that contrary to the American perceptions of Iran or the representation of Iran in the Western media, there is a huge amount of support for the Revolutionary Guards and the political order in Iran. And this is something that the Americans did not calculate when they carried out this act of war. And indeed, before bringing the bodies back to Iran, the funeral procession began in Iraq, actually. And in every city that it passed through, there were, again, there are hundreds of thousands of mourners. And the Americans, who over the last few months have been saying how Iraqis hate Iran and how they want Iranian influence gone and how they hate the popular mobilization forces, that proved to be a false narrative as well. So ironically, Trump, who wanted to assassinate these people, these 2 generals, because an Iraqi senior commander was also murdered by the Americans in the airstrike, the deputy head of the Iraqi mobilization force, who was key in defeating ISIS alongside General Soleimani. The Iraqis and the Iranians were both outraged, and contrary to the perception in Washington that these airstrikes would intimidate Iran and people would be celebrating, it had the exact opposite effect, and it only caused to rally Iranians, to bring people together, to bring Iraqis together, and to bring Iran and Iraq together. So I think that Trump miscalculated immensely, although I doubt he recognizes what he's done. But again, this is another instance where Western narratives are in complete conflict with the reality on the ground.
Concern has been stoked around the globe that, a broader regional conflict could erupt. Do you think that this will be the case?
I think that will happen because the United States has carried out an act of war against Iran, and they've carried out an act of war against Iraq, killing 2 high-ranking officials, 1 Iranian, General Soleimani, and 1 Iraqi who was his partner, his counterpart in Iraq in the fight against ISIS. And so the Iranians and the Iraqis believe that if they do not respond to this American aggression, that would be appeasing Trump, and that would only encourage him to continue murdering people and to continue airstrikes. So they feel that they have to punish the United States to make them regret it so that they discontinue this. Some Americans say that the Iranians don't have that ability, but it's obviously nonsense. If there is military conflict in the region, the U.S. military bases are in countries like Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, and these countries will be considered by Iran, if there's conflict, to be Iran's antagonists, because they're allowing the Americans to attack Iran through their airspace and through the bases that they've given to the Americans.
Now, Professor Seyed, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time this evening, but just in reaction to U.S. President Donald Trump also stating the fact that if Iran were to attack any of the American assets, he would target 52 Iranian sites. With the vow of revenge coming from Iran, what do you think is likely to happen in reaction to that?
Well, that's what I was getting at, actually. First of all, Trump said he threatened to destroy cultural sites, which just shows how irrational and inhumane he is. But if the United States attacks Iran, those countries that hold American bases will be targets. And if Iran targets the American base in the Emirates, they will also target the Emirati regime as well, because they will have been facilitating the Americans. The Emirates would collapse in days. And so would Saudi Arabia. All of their oil and gas assets are right alongside the Iranian border. So the Americans are relying on very weak regimes. And personally, I think that people should not go to the United Arab Emirates during this period unless things calm down later on. But the United States is not in such a strong position. If they want to really fight a war with Iran, they have to bring 1 to 2 million soldiers here. And that would be very difficult. And again, as I said, these regimes that the Americans are relying on are very vulnerable. So the belief in Tehran is that the Iranians should punish the Americans, but also that the Americans would be smart not to push this conflict any further.
Professor Seyed, thank you so much for your time. We'll leave it there for now. That is Professor Seyed Marandi from the University of Tehran in Iran, joining us there via Skype.